Ryan Hayes had always been an explorer at heart, though his explorations had been confined to the confines of Earth's bustling cities and its towering skyscrapers. Born into a world of technology and corporations, where innovation was the currency and humans seemed to have mastered nearly everything, Ryan was weary. The constant pressure to be productive, to achieve more, to never stop advancing it, was all draining. So when an offer came in, a strange one, to leave everything behind and work for an alien species on a distant planet, Ryan was intrigued. The ad had been simple, almost too simple. The Threxians, a name that sounded more like an ancient legend than a real species, were offering him a job. No questions asked. He would be paid handsomely, far more than any position on Earth could promise. The only requirement? A scientific mind and a willingness to work with them. Ryan's curiosity got the better of him. After all, who wouldn't jump at the chance to escape the daily grind and do something entirely new? The Threxians had made all the arrangements. A spaceship arrived at his doorstep, sleek and silent, and whisked him away to a world far beyond the stars. The journey itself was smooth, almost too smooth. Ryan spent the time reading, researching the Threxians. But there was little to learn. Their technology seemed more advanced than anything humanity had ever dreamed of, but details about their species were sparse. They were humanoid, with elongated limbs and smooth, bluish skin. Their society was organized and peaceful, and they had a reputation for being secretive. The first sight of the Threxian planet left Ryan in awe. It was nothing like Earth, yet it was familiar in its own strange way. The skies were a deep, iridescent purple, and the lush green hills rolled gently under a yellow sun. In the distance, he could see small villages dotting the landscape, connected by winding paths that seemed to shimmer in the alien light. There were no cities, no towering buildings, just peaceful, quiet settlements. Ryan's new home, a small village named Talux, was nestled at the edge of a vast forest. The villagers were waiting for him when he arrived, their faces bright with excitement. The leader, a tall Threxian named Kryn, greeted him with a warm but formal handshake. "We are grateful for your arrival, Ryan Hayes," Kryn said, his voice smooth and soothing. "You are here to help us in ways that no one else can." Ryan smiled, trying to hide the unease creeping up his spine. "I'm happy to help however I can." The villagers took him on a tour of Talux, showing him the simple, organic structures they called homes. There were no advanced gadgets or complex machinery here. Everything was crafted from the land, designed to coexist with nature. Ryan couldn't help but admire the Threxians' peaceful way of life. It was a far cry from the fast-paced, cutthroat world he had left behind on Earth. They showed him his new quarters, a small cottage overlooking the hills. The village was quiet, calm, and everything felt so serene. The kind of place where one could easily find peace, away from the hustle and bustle of the world. It should have been a dream come true for Ryan. But as the days passed, something about the Threxians' hospitality began to feel strange, as though they were hiding something. The first few days were filled with mundane introductions. Ryan was given small tasks, like helping to analyze the local plant life or studying the animals that roamed the nearby forests. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they were testing him, waiting for him to unlock some deeper secret. Still, he kept his focus on the work, hoping that the reason he was here would soon become clear. Then, one morning, Kryn invited him to the village hall for a special meeting. "Ryan," Kryn began, his voice softer now, almost as if he was trying to reassure him. "I have something important to discuss with you." "I have something important to discuss with you." Ryan listened attentively as Kryn spoke, his words carefully chosen. "We need your help in a matter that is central to the future of our people. You see, our species, as peaceful and prosperous as we once were, has been facing a great challenge. We have reached the point where we are unable to reproduce on our own. Our population has been in decline for generations, and despite all of our efforts, we have not been able to find a solution." Ryan furrowed his brow. "I don't understand. You're a technologically advanced species, right?" Surely there's something. Kryn held up his hand, silencing him gently. We have tried everything. Genetic engineering, advanced medical treatments, even attempts at crossbreeding with other species, but all of our efforts have failed. Our once thriving society is slowly fading, and we need your help. Ryan was puzzled. What exactly do you need from me? Ryan was puzzled. Kryn hesitated for a moment, as though weighing his words carefully. We need your genes, Ryan. More specifically, we need human DNA to save our people. Our species is biologically compatible with humans in ways that no other species can match. Your genetic diversity, your strength, your resilience, these are traits we can't replicate on our own. Ryan's eyes widened. Wait, you're asking me to help you reproduce? Kryn nodded slowly. Yes, you are here because your genes hold the key to our survival. We believe that, by combining our genetics with yours, we can create a new generation of Threxians, one that will be stronger, more fertile, and able to rebuild our society. Ryan sat back, stunned. He had expected a scientific challenge, maybe some kind of research project. But this was something else entirely. The Threxians, with their peaceful nature and advanced technology, were asking him to mate with their females to essentially become a breeding vessel for their species. I don't know what to say, Ryan stammered. His mind raced. Was this some kind of joke? A misunderstanding? But the seriousness in Kryn's eyes told him it wasn't. The leader of the Threxians continued, his voice filled with urgency. We have tried everything else. We have no other option, Ryan. Our entire race is at risk. You were chosen because of your genetic makeup. You are the only one who can help us. Ryan stood up, his thoughts swirling. This wasn't what he had signed up for. But as he looked around the room, at the hopeful faces of the Threxian villagers, he knew they were desperate. They weren't asking out of some strange desire, they were asking for survival. The weight of their future rested on his shoulders. He needed time to think. I need to process this, Ryan said, his voice shaky. Can I have some time alone? Kryn gave a solemn nod. Of course. Take as much time as you need. We will be here when you are ready. As Ryan stepped out into the cool air of the village, he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over him. He had come here to escape Earth, to find peace, and yet he had walked straight into a moral and scientific dilemma. He wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. Should he help them? Should he refuse? And if he did refuse, what would that mean for the Threxians? As he stood there, staring at the hills in the distance, he realized that his time in Talux had just become far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. Ryan spent the next few days in a haze. The peaceful village of Talux, which had once seemed like a paradise, now felt like a prison. The beauty of the landscape, the serenity of the rolling hills, and the quiet of the forests were all tainted by the heavy decision that weighed on his mind. Every time he passed by a Threxian villager, he couldn't help but feel their eyes on him, waiting, hoping. They had made their request clear. He was their last hope, the key to their survival. But could he really help them? Was it even right to do so? He kept replaying the conversation he'd had with Kryn. The words echoed in his head. Your genes are the key to our survival. How could he possibly accept such an overwhelming responsibility? He had come here to escape, to find peace, not to become a part of some bizarre biological experiment. Ryan tried to focus on his work, hoping that keeping his mind occupied with tasks would help him forget about the dilemma. But it was impossible. Everywhere he went, the weight of the situation followed him, like a shadow that refused to leave. In the mornings, he worked in the Threxians' fields, studying the plants and analyzing the soil. In the afternoons, he explored the nearby forest, cataloging the different species of wildlife. The work was interesting, and for a time, it allowed him to focus on something else. But no matter how much he tried to ignore it, the truth was always there waiting for him to confront it. On the fourth day, Kryn invited him to the village hall again. This time, Ryan didn't hesitate. He knew the conversation was coming. It had to. He had been avoiding it for long enough. Kryn met him at the entrance of the hall, his expression somber. "Ryan," he began, his voice soft but firm. "I know you are struggling with our request, but you must understand that we are not asking this of you lightly. Our species is on the brink of extinction. Without your help, we will be gone in a few generations. We need you." Ryan nodded slowly, his mind racing. "I understand your situation, Kryn, but I don't know if I can do what you're asking." "It's a lot to take in." Kryn's eyes softened. "I know, and I do not wish to force you into this. But you must understand, Ryan, that we have no other choice. We have tried everything, science, medicine, even interspecies breeding. Nothing has worked. Our people are dying. And you are our last hope." Ryan stared at the floor, trying to find the right words. The pressure was suffocating. He had always believed that he could handle anything life threw at him. But this was different. How could he possibly help a species survive at the cost of his own comfort, his own values? "I'm not a savior, Kryn," Ryan said, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't come here to play the role of a hero. I came here to escape, to do some work, and then go home. This wasn't what I expected." Kryn's expression grew serious. "And I understand that. But think of the generations to come, Ryan. Think of the lives that will be lost if we do not act now. We have tried to save ourselves, but we cannot. We need you. Not just for the sake of our people, but for the future of all life on this planet." Ryan could feel the weight of Kryn's words pressing down on him. The future. The lives that could be saved. But at what cost? Could he really do this? Could he really participate in such a primitive act, as Kryn had put it? The thought made him feel sick, but he knew that if he refused, it would mean the end of the Threxians. He needed more time. He needed to understand this better, to figure out what was really at stake. "I need to see more," Ryan said suddenly, surprising himself. "I need to understand your culture, your history. I can't make a decision like this without knowing more about who you are and where you come from." Kryn paused for a moment, then nodded. "Of course. I will show you. There are things you need to know. Things that will help you understand why we are asking you for this." The next few days were a blur of research, history, and culture. Kryn took Ryan to the heart of the Threxian village, where ancient texts were kept in towering stone buildings. These texts told the story of the Threxians' rise and fall, of their peaceful empire that had once stretched across the stars. They had been a proud, powerful species, the rulers of many worlds. But all that had changed in the wake of a devastating war, a war that had left them shattered, their genetic pool damaged beyond repair. Ryan was shocked by what he learned. The Threxians had once been a thriving species, their technology and culture far more advanced than humanity's ever had been. They had explored the galaxy, made contact with countless species, and had been hailed as wise and benevolent leaders. But something had gone terribly wrong. The war, as Kryn had explained, had been the catalyst. It was a war that had destroyed their civilization, leaving them fractured and struggling to survive. The genetic damage caused by the war was severe. Many of their males were infertile, and the females were becoming sterile. Their population was dwindling, and the Threxians were no longer able to reproduce in the way they once had. Ryan began to understand their desperation. They were not asking him for selfish reasons. They were asking for survival. The Threxians had reached the point where they could no longer afford to be choosy. If they didn't act soon, they would be gone. All that would be left would be their history, their ancient texts, and the memories of a once great people. But as Ryan delved deeper into their history, he began to notice something strange. There were hints in the texts, subtle references to a time when the Threxians had interacted with humans. They had encountered human explorers long before Ryan had arrived on their world. These references were scattered across the texts, almost as if the Threxians had tried to bury them. Ryan was puzzled. He knew that humans had only recently begun to venture into space in any meaningful way. So how could the Threxians have encountered humans in the past? Had they known about Earth? Was there some connection between the two species that had been lost to time? One evening, Ryan approached Kryn with his findings. He showed him the passages in the ancient texts that mentioned humans. Kryn seemed hesitant. But after a long silence, he finally spoke. "It is true," Kryn said softly. "We have encountered humans before, long before you arrived. There was a time when we lived among your kind. But that is a story for another time. Long before you arrived, long before you arrived another time." Ryan's heart raced. What was Kryn hiding? Why had the Threxians tried to cover up this connection between their species and humans? "I need to know more, Kryn," Ryan insisted. "What happened? What was the relationship between our species?" Kryn hesitated, his face clouded with something that looked like regret. "The past is not something we speak of lightly, Ryan. It was a complicated time. There were mistakes, misunderstandings, and things that cannot be undone. But that is not the reason you are here. You are here to help us. To give us a future." Ryan stared at him, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. There was more to this story, more than Kryn was letting on. But at the moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the decision Ryan had to make. He was torn. His heart told him to walk away, to refuse and leave the Threxians to their fate. But his mind told him that their survival, perhaps even the survival of the planet itself, depended on him. If he refused, they would perish. And if he agreed, he would forever be bound to this strange, alien race. There was no easy answer, but one thing was certain: he could no longer avoid the truth. He had to make a choice. Ryan didn't sleep much that night. The words from Kryn echoed in his mind, replaying over and over again. The Threxians had once lived among humans. It was a revelation that shook him, but he still couldn't make sense of it. How had they known about humanity so long before Ryan's arrival? And why had they kept it a secret? His mind raced as he lay in bed, staring at the wooden ceiling of his cottage. The truth seemed just beyond his grasp, like a puzzle missing one crucial piece. But even more pressing was the decision he had to make. He had spent the past few days trying to block out the weight of the request the Threxians had made of him. But it was impossible to ignore. They needed him to help them survive, biologically, genetically. They had chosen him because of his human DNA, believing that combining their species with his could save them from extinction. But could he really agree to something like that? Ryan had never considered himself a hero. He was just an ordinary guy, a scientist by training, trying to make sense of a world that often seemed out of control. And yet, here he was, in a foreign village on a distant planet, being asked to make a choice that could determine the future of an entire species. It felt like something out of a sci-fi novel, but it was his reality now. He couldn't escape it. The next morning, Kryn came to visit him again. The Threxian leader's expression was kind but serious, as though he knew the weight of the conversation that was about to take place. Ryan had decided that he needed to know more before making any kind of decision. He couldn't simply walk away, not without understanding the full scope of the Threxians' history, their plight, and what it would mean for him to be part of their future. "I've been thinking," Ryan began, as he welcomed Kryn into his cottage. "You mentioned something about humans and Threxians living together in the past. Why didn't you tell me about this earlier? What happened?" "What?" Kryn's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Ryan thought he saw a flicker of something like regret. The leader hesitated before speaking. "It was a long time ago," Kryn began slowly. "Back when our species was at its peak, we had colonies on many worlds, including one on Earth. We had contact with humans for many centuries, though it was not always peaceful. We traded, shared knowledge, but we also made mistakes." Ryan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What kind of mistakes?" Kryn sighed, a deep, weary sound. "We were too proud. Our technology had advanced so far that we believed ourselves to be superior to other species, including humans. We took what we wanted without consideration for the consequences. The relationship between our people and yours was strained, to say the least. Ryan frowned, trying to piece it together. So, what happened? Why did the Threxians leave Earth? Why didn't you stay? Kryn's gaze turned distant, his mind clearly drifting back to a painful past. The war. The war between our people and other factions in the galaxy. We were forced to leave Earth. And in doing so, we cut ties with humanity. It was a matter of survival. Our species had been fractured, weakened by the war, and we could not afford to stay in a place where we were not wanted. Ryan sat back, absorbing the information. It made sense, in a way, but there was something troubling about it. The Threxians had left Earth, but why had they never tried to re-establish contact? And what had really happened between their two species that made them leave without a trace? Kryn continued, his voice quiet. We tried to reach out again after the war, but by then, humanity had already changed. You had developed your own technologies, your own way of life. You had grown, independent. Our species, once so proud, had been reduced to nothing more than a distant memory. We were no longer the powerful empire we once were. Ryan nodded slowly, his mind spinning. He had always wondered about the origins of humanity's technological advances now. It seemed there was more to the story than he had ever imagined. The Threxians had been there first, guiding humanity from the shadows, but their presence had been a fleeting one. And now they were on the verge of extinction, needing Ryan's help to survive. We tried everything to rebuild, Kryn went on, his voice almost a whisper now, but our genetics were damaged by the war. We couldn't reproduce on our own. And now we are the last of our kind. Our population is dwindling, and we cannot continue without help. Ryan felt a pang of sympathy. Despite the strange request they had made of him, he understood their desperation. The Threxians were not asking for something out of greed or selfishness, they were asking for survival. But the thought of becoming a part of their breeding program, of helping them create a new generation of Threxians, it made him uneasy. He wasn't sure if he was ready for that. I get it, Ryan said, his voice quiet but steady. I understand why you need my help. But it's still a huge ask. I don't know if I can do it. This isn't what I thought I was coming here for. Kryn's eyes softened, but there was still a sense of urgency in his gaze. I know, Ryan. But we are not asking for something small. We are asking for everything. The future of our species is in your hands. And if you refuse, we will not survive. You must choose, and you must choose soon. Time is running out. Ryan felt the pressure again, the weight of their entire future bearing down on him. How could he make this decision? How could he choose to help a species continue? Even if it meant something that went against everything he believed. And what if he chose to walk away? What would happen to the Threxians then? As he sat there, lost in thought, another figure appeared at the door of his cottage. It was Jila, the Threxian woman who had spoken to him before, the one who had been wary of the council and their plans. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her expression hard and serious. Ryan, Jila said, her voice low but insistent. You need to listen to me. The Threxian Council. They've been hiding something from you. They don't want you to know the whole truth. Ryan looked up, surprised. What do you mean? Jila glanced at Kryn, who had stiffened at her sudden appearance. It's true that our species is dying. But there's more to it than that. The Council has been keeping secrets about how far they're willing to go to survive. They don't care about the moral cost anymore. They will do anything to make sure their people survive. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. What are you saying? What are they planning? Jila's eyes locked onto his, her voice filled with urgency. They've been using genetic manipulation, trying to create a hybrid species. They've already experimented on others before you. And they will keep using humans if they have to. Don't let them fool you into thinking this is all about helping them. This is about control. Quote, Ryan's mind spun. He had suspected there was more to the Threxians than they were letting on. But he hadn't expected this. If Gila was right, then their request was more than just a plea for help. It was a calculated move to ensure their continued dominance. I don't know who to trust anymore, Ryan admitted, his voice shaky. The council says one thing, and you're telling me another. How do I know what's true? Gila stepped closer, her voice softer now. The truth is, Ryan, no one can make this decision for you. You have to decide for yourself. But whatever you choose, don't let them manipulate you. You have more power than you think. Ryan nodded, trying to absorb everything she had told him. This was no longer just about helping the Threxians, it was about making sure that humanity wasn't used as a tool for another species' survival. He stood up, his mind made up. It was time to confront the council and get to the bottom of this once and for all. Ryan didn't sleep that night. His mind raced, turning over everything he had learned in the past few days. The Threxians were desperate. He could see that. They had once been a powerful species, but now they were on the brink of extinction. The request they had made of him using his human DNA to help their species survive wasn't just an ask for help. It was a last-ditch effort to keep their race from disappearing altogether. But the more Ryan thought about it, the more confused and uneasy he felt. Gila's warning echoed in his mind. The Threxian Council wasn't just trying to save their species, they had been manipulating their genetics, experimenting with hybridization, and using humans as resources. They were willing to do whatever it took, even if it meant crossing ethical lines. Ryan had come to this planet with one idea in mind: to escape Earth and live a peaceful life. Now, he was caught in the middle of a power struggle between a dying species and his own moral compass. The next morning, he made up his mind. He had to confront Kryn and the rest of the council. It was the only way to get to the bottom of everything. He couldn't keep walking around in the dark, trying to piece things together. He needed answers, and more than that, he needed to know if there was any truth to what Gila had said. Ryan walked toward the village hall, his heart pounding with each step. The villagers were going about their day as usual, but there was a tension in the air. Ryan could feel it. They were all waiting for him to make a decision. Kryn had made it clear that the Threxians depended on him. But now, after everything he had learned, Ryan wasn't sure if helping them was the right thing to do. As he entered the hall, Kryn stood waiting for him. His expression was calm, but there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. The others were there too, members of the Threxian Council, sitting around a large stone table. Their eyes were all on him as he walked in, and the weight of their expectations hit him like a wave. Ryan didn't feel like a savior. He felt like a pawn in a game he didn't understand. "I've been thinking," Ryan said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "I need to know the truth. All of it." Kryn looked at him carefully. "You already know the truth, Ryan. Our people need your help. We have no other choice. The future of our species depends on it." "No," Ryan said, shaking his head. "That's not enough. I need to know everything. About the past, about the war, about the hybrids. Everything." The room fell silent. Kryn's gaze hardened, and for the first time, Ryan saw something that looked like fear in his eyes. "I told you," Kryn began slowly. "Our past is not something we speak of lightly. We've made mistakes. We tried to control things, to manipulate genetics to create a perfect future, but we lost our way. The war, it changed us. We were no longer the species we once were." Ryan took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. "And the hybrids? Gila told me that you've been experimenting on humans, trying to create hybrids between our species. Is that true?" Kryn hesitated, his eyes darting to the other council members. They all looked uncomfortable, as if they knew Ryan was about to uncover something they had been hiding for far too long. Finally, Kryn spoke. "Yes," he said quietly, "it's true. We have tried to create hybrids crossing our genes with human DNA. We believed it would be the key to our survival. But the results have been unpredictable. Some of the experiments worked, Others failed. But we thought that by combining our strengths, we could overcome our infertility. Ryan's stomach twisted. He felt betrayed not just by the Threxians, but by himself for not seeing it sooner. The hybrids weren't just an attempt to help their species. They were a product of desperation and greed. The Threxians were willing to do anything to survive, even if it meant crossing moral lines. "And you've been using us humans as your experiments?" Ryan asked, his voice shaking with anger. "You've been taking our genetic material without our consent?" Kryn didn't answer immediately. He seemed to weigh his words carefully before responding. "We didn't know what else to do. We thought we could save both our species. We never meant to harm anyone. But we didn't have time for consent, Ryan. Time was running out." Ryan clenched his fists. "That doesn't make it right. You can't just take what you need from someone else. No matter how desperate you are, you've been manipulating us for your own survival, and that's not something I can be a part of." The room was tense now. The other council members exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Kryn's face had softened, though there was a hint of sorrow in his expression. "We did what we thought was necessary," Kryn said softly. "We didn't want to die, Ryan. We thought we were saving ourselves, saving our culture. But we see now. We see that we have lost our way." Ryan stood in silence, his mind racing. He had come to this village with the hope of finding a peaceful existence. But instead, he had found a broken people, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for the chance to survive. The Threxians had made their choice a long time ago, and now they were asking him to make the same choice. But Ryan couldn't do it. He couldn't be a part of their plan, especially not when it meant using humans as tools in their desperate struggle to survive. He looked around at the council members, his voice firm. "I can't help you with this. I can't be a part of your experiments. If you want to survive, you need to find another way. I'm sorry, but I won't be your tool." Kryn's face tightened, but he didn't argue. "I understand," he said quietly. "You have your own beliefs, your own morality. But know this, Ryan, our time is running out. We cannot continue without help." Ryan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. There was no turning back now. He had chosen his path, and it was one that didn't involve sacrificing his principles for the sake of survival. The Threxians might be facing extinction, but Ryan wasn't going to let them drag him down with them. "I'm sorry," Ryan said again, his voice softer now. "I really am, but this is something I can't be a part of." Kryn nodded slowly, his expression sad but resigned. "I wish things had been different, Ryan. I truly do. But we will respect your decision." Ryan turned to leave, his heart heavy with the weight of what had just happened. He couldn't help but feel guilty, knowing that the Threxians would continue their fight for survival without his help. But deep down, he knew that he had made the right choice. He couldn't compromise who he was, no matter how desperate they were. As Ryan walked out of the hall and into the sunlight, he felt the cool breeze of the alien planet wash over him. He had come to Talux in search of peace, but instead, he had found something far more complicated. The Threxians' desperation had pulled him into a world of moral dilemmas, and in the end, he had made a choice that was true to himself. But even as he walked away, he knew one thing for sure. The future of the Threxians was no longer in his hands. It was up to them to decide how far they were willing to go to survive. And whatever happened next, Ryan would have to live with the consequences of his decision. As he left the village behind, he couldn't shake the feeling that his journey wasn't over. The universe was full of unknowns, and he had just taken the first step into a much larger world.